brave enough to get on a boat and set off over the horizon had to hope that before their food ran out, they'd reach another bit of land, preferably somewhere where the people didn't have wet noses and didn't want you to throw sticks for them to chase. You'd have to be daft to take that risk, wouldn't you? And yet, once big, strong ships had been invented, people started sailing all over the globe, even though their journeys were often sheer hell. The Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan spent over 3 months at sea without fresh food. His crew had to eat sawdust, bits of ox hide, and stale biscuits full of worms and soaked in rat's wee. I don't know about you, but I think I'd rather have stayed at home playing Grand Theft Horse and Cart, or whatever it was they played in those days. What on earth was it that made people go through all these horrors? Were they insane? Did they do it just for a dare? Were they bored? No, they had a very special reason. They were all looking for something extremely valuable. Gold. The kings and queens of Europe loved gold. They couldn't get enough of it, which, if you think about it, is actually a bit weird. I mean, what's so special about gold? You can't cut it up and put it in a sandwich. You can't build a block of flats with it. You can't set fire to it when you're feeling a bit chilly. And you can't make a decent weapon or a tool out of it. Swords made of gold tend to crumple up if you try and poke anyone with them, and a golden hammer is about as useful as a chocolate hot water bottle. But kings and queens liked the way gold sparkled. They used it to make coins, they put it in their crowns, they turned it into jewellery, and they bought things with it like iron, which, unlike gold, is a very good metal for poking people with. The Island of Endless Gold. In the 13th century, a #1 bestseller hit the bookshelves of Europe. It was called The Book of the Marvels of the World, and it was all about the adventures of a real-life explorer called Marco Polo. Starting at the age of 17, he'd spent 24 years travelling to places like China, India, Japan and Sri Lanka. He described his epic journeys on horseback, riding through deserts and over mountains to strange places dripping with silk, spices, ivory, and lots of gold. He said people in the East had so much of the stuff that if you saw it, you wouldn't be able to believe your eyes. He said there was an island called Kipangu where the amounts of it were endless. The king lived in a palace made of gold. The floors were of gold. Even the windows were gold. Back in Europe, lots of people read Marco Polo's book and thought to themselves, imagine what we could do with all that. Well, you know what I'm talking about. So explorers were sent off to find a sea route to the east in order to bring back fabulous riches by the boatload. But sailing east was harder than it sounds. The route was long and complicated. It was incredibly difficult to work out how to get there. And in the process, explorers kept bumping into islands, coastlines and continents they never knew existed. And what did they do when they landed on them? They stuck a flag in the sand and claimed them for their own country back home. Crazy Columbus! One of these explorers was an Italian called Christopher Columbus. He'd read Marco Polo's book and was desperate to be the first person to find a route to the east. He came up with a weird plan. Instead of sailing east, he'd sail in the opposite direction and head west. This wasn't actually as crazy as it sounds. Columbus knew the world was round and that if you travelled west, you'd eventually come full circle and end up in the east. But it took a long time to persuade anybody to give him the money to try it out. He asked all the kings and queens of Europe, but most of them thought he was mad. Eventually, though, the king and queen of Spain agreed to pay for his trip, and in 1492, Columbus headed off into the unknown.